There is love in this place, whenever two or more of us gathered in His name. I thought the world is all the same.
Good night. Welcome again to Level Up Your Marriage with Paul and Raquel Blake, coming to you from the island of Jamaica. And we are looking forward to our discussion this evening. We give thanks that you have allowed us into your space so that we can have these discussions. And the last time we were on, we were discussing the subject of respecting your marriage, what to allow and what not to allow in your relationship. And we are also looking forward to having this discussion tonight, continuing this discussion. And we pray that something will be said, something will be discussed that will help you in your relationship, in your marriage. Welcome, Raquel.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here again.
We will get right into the topic, looking at respecting your marriage. And we just want to do a quick recap on some of the stuff that we would have discussed last time. We had looked at the importance of setting boundaries and guidelines in your relationship. We had talked about setting time aside for regular check-ins and to discuss emotions, goals, and concerns. And we made mention that these things are really important to our relationship. We had talked about the need of being vulnerable and transparent. And this is something that we can't discuss enough. The importance of what vulnerability and transparency does to a relationship. In our common terms, we would say the importance of keeping it real and open. This is very important. Openness and honesty, right? Your wife or your husband, your spouse, must not only see you in your strong moments, but must also see you in your not so strong moments. They must see you as a real human being. Right? We're not putting on a show, and nobody has to, stand up and always be brave and courageous. Right? We have to sometimes be willing to lay ourselves naked. I like to discuss vulnerability as that you are really bearing your soul, and that is important if you want your relationship to survive.
Yes. And and spouses, just to add, spouses should definitely create a safe space.
Create a safe space
for your partner to be vulnerable.
Yes.
Because it's, and like you said last time, it's not easy. It's very difficult for some people and some more than others.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
So we have to be mindful that we want to create a safe space. Allow your spouse to know and to feel that, you are accepted and loved unconditionally.
Yes. We had also looked at the importance of of choosing the right time and place to have discussions, picking a neutral and private setting where both partners can feel comfortable. Avoid initiating serious conversations when times are stressful or when we are emotionally charged. That it's very important to express appreciation, to seek understanding, and not victory. And I just had to remind a couple of this just this week that even when we have our disagreements in our relationship, the end result is not to win an argument or to win a conversation or to win a disagreement. The aim is to seek clarity and understanding and then come back to a place where both of you are on the same page. It may take some time to get there, but it is never about winning an argument. It's never about feeling vindicated. And just to beat somebody over the head with
Your words.
your words and your position of righteousness, right? It is always about what is important for the growth and development of your relationship. And one of the things we had mentioned, Raquel, is the importance of listening. And that is one of the things that always comes up in our discussions when whatever marriage discussion we are doing, we always talk about the importance of active listening for communication. And just this week I had this discussion that about 80% of our relationship failures have to do with communication. And about 70% of communication have to do with the inability to listen. Right? And somebody will say, but I can hear. And we always said that hearing is not listening. Because anybody that has two working ears can hear, but not many people listen. And so we had mentioned that there has to be active listening involved, and it means that we have to be willing to listen without interruption, to be willing to listen using and even respond with a calm and kind tone. The importance of validating people's feelings, validating your spouse's feelings, to avoid blame and criticism. And we had mentioned this, Raquel, the importance of using I statements.
Definitely.
Right? Rather than you never. We use I.
And you always.
You always. We had mentioned that. And also to focus on the issue and not the person. No, it's not a personal attack. You're trying to deal with a particular issue. And so it is very important for us to recognize, to separate the issue from the person. And I think many times we don't do that very well either. We attack both issue and person. And in attacking both issue and person, nobody comes away with benefiting from the situation at all. And so those are some of the things that we should not be allowing in our relationship.
We should be
we should be allowing these things in our relationship, to come to a better understanding, be willing to apologize and forgive, to choose reconciliation over winning, to pray together with each other, to honor each other's perspective, and also to be willing, to apologize and forgive already. That is important. I probably need to repeat it, because this element of forgiveness is sometimes also lacking in marriage. And a lot of time it stems from, Raquel, of the spirit of always wanting to win. Whenever you realize that whenever we want to win, there is no focus on forgiving or even apologizing for that matter. Because all I'm focused on is winning the conversation, to vindicate myself and all of that. And so nobody comes away with any resolution, no understanding. And we have to allow these things in our relationship if we want to have better marriages, because it is what keeps the relationship going. When we focus on these things and we keep growing where these things are concerned. So that is a little recap. Anything to add, Raquel?
Just to add that, couples, when they were dating, they were all over each other. They spoke and they were always in touch. And sometimes when they get married now, the conversation slack off. But the idea is to remember that there's a friendship, there's a connection. You're each other's partner, you're each other's champion. And so as we talk about, the things that we should allow, we should definitely support the idea of having each other as friends, looking at each other as friends, because people take friendships very, very. Friendship is meaningful to people,
Yes,
and
true.
so the element of friendship is something that you can use to enhance your relationship. We had the Cunninghams on in December, and they spoke about the importance of being friends in their marriage. So we definitely want to throw that one out. That's a nugget. So continue being friends in your marriage, in your relationship, because that will also help when we are in terms of this discussion about respect in your marriage, and that is one thing that should be allowed. So we want to segue now into looking at some of the things that we should not allow. Correct?
That's right. That's right. And the first one is a big one. What are some of the things that we should not allow in our relationship? The first one is secrecy and deception. And we could actually spend the entire hour looking at this. Marriages are destroyed by secrecy and deception. People keep secrets for various reasons, and the element of deception comes up in the relationship also for various reasons. But I would want to suggest that there is really no healthy place for secrecy and deception in marriage. Marriage must be built on honesty, and the element of secrecy creates an immediate distrust.
True.
And the basis of relationships, the basis of marital relationships is trust. It's
Yeah.
one of the most important element of your relationship, the ability to trust your partner. And not only it's not just a matter of trusting, but trust actually carries the idea of you are giving yourself over to this person, you are trusting them with your very existence. And when you find out that there's an element of deception or secrecy in the relationship, it can destroy the relationship.
Take a serious toll.
It does take a serious toll. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 22 says, the Lord detests lying lips, and he delights in people who are trustworthy. And I would also say that in marriage, we delight in people who are trustworthy. Right?
Agreed. Agreed.
How, Raquel, how do people cultivate honesty in their relationships?
That's such an important question. And it is very possible. It takes a balance of a number of things. There have to be open communication.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about mutual trust. I mean, the trust has to be two-sided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there also has to be the element of freedom. You would figure that some people figure that if once there's trust and once there's honesty, personal freedom is still in the mix,
That's
because
right.
it's important for each person to remain their unique self and have the personal freedom. But of course, this with freedom comes responsibility.
That's
Yeah.
right. True. True.
So as we talk about how to cultivate honesty without feeling controlled or feeling like you're a doormat, I think there has to be a good balance of these things.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yes, and I agree. I do agree. I do agree. I would also want to bring into the mix the element of transparency, where being an open book in how we operate in the relationship is important. As we said before, that secrecy and deception creates distrust, and I think we need to live our lives in such a way that even if something is said about us on the outside of the relationship, your spouse can trust you so much that um they know that it is not so, right? And always be willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of something that is said when Paul writes to young Timothy in the book of Timothy, when he gives the qualifications for the elders, and he said to them that the elder must be blameless. And the idea that is given is that no one can stop anybody from saying anything negative about the integrity or person of the elder. But when he says that the elder must be blameless, it is actually implying that even if something is said, this man must have a level of integrity that nobody even believes because of how he operates. And I think that is one of the principles that also has to do with marriage, because people will attack your relationship for any reason, jealousy, whatever reason. But our relationship must be so transparent that even if an element of this comes into the picture, we are so transparent that there is no room to believe anything else. Right?
That's true. That takes a lot of work.
Yeah,
It
yes, it
takes a lot of
does.
work
Yes, it
because
does.
it doesn't happen overnight. And even persons who are married for a number of years, if they don't work on that aspect, you know, being married for a number of years doesn't guarantee the success of a relationship or a
True.
marriage.
Yes, I agree.
So that this element that you're talking about, where the blameless and the transparency, the mutual trust, and the open communication, those things will foster no one, and deepen the commitment, deepen the relationship. So if you have persons who are trying to be mischievous and speak disparagingly about your partner, you can just smile
Yeah, yeah.
because
It says
that's not
yes.
true,
Yeah, Jesus says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no."
Yeah.
And yeah, I love what the idea of honesty and transparency, and eliminating secrecy and deception, is the fact that a lot of people like to use this whole thing of independence as a kind of smoke screen of doing things in their relationship. We are independent people, we are independent thinkers and all of that, but I can't be in a relationship with somebody and they it's almost as if I am living another life, so to speak, because there are things or aspects of my life that I keep from my spouse, that I think that my spouse really has um it should not be privy to. And this alone, this is deception,
Yes.
right? Our lives must be so open that we know, and I just use us as an example. One of the things that we would practice in our relationship is that at at any given hour of the day we know where each other is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that we have developed in our relationship over the years. It is not because I am keeping watch on you or you are keeping watch on me, but there's a level of accountability in our relationship,
Yes.
right? It is not because you are trying to run me or I am trying to run you, but we have grown into this transparency where we are able to, you know, look at our own lives on a daily basis and hold each other accountable. Basically, we know what happens in our days. We know we might not know every single detail by moment, but we can. If somebody calls me and asks me where is Raquel, um, I can say Raquel is at work and she should be in a meeting about now. She might be looking forward to going home now, and all of that. And that for me, it doesn't impede on my freedom. It doesn't impede on my independence.
No, that is just being transparent,
It has been transparent.
and that is healthy for marriage. That is healthy for marriage. So that is.
But what about the idea of deception, though? Because again, and as counselors, one of the things that we would have to deal with in our different counseling with clients is people destroy their marriages by being willfully deceiving. Right? We have dealt with cases, Raquel, where spouses just lie, and sometimes it is and it's just being very frank. Sometimes people lie, and it's almost as it becomes a part of them.
True.
We have had situations in dealing with couples where couples going through a crisis in their marriage, and they tell one lie to cover up another one. And one of the things I find about lies is that the more lies you tell, you dig yourself deeper into a rut.
Exactly.
Right?
Never to come out.
Never to come out. And oftentimes people tell so much lies that they forget even the first one that they tell.
That is setting up the relationship for a serious downfall. And so definitely, the element of deception is a serious one, and that is one thing that should be avoided.
Should be avoided. Should be avoided like the plague.
Right? Indeed.
Right. So and as we discuss it, some of the things you can do to safeguard against secrecy and deception is really from the onset you create a non-judgmental environment. Create an environment where open communication can take place, where
but you notice how many times open communication is coming up.
Yes, Raquel, and that comes up again every time. Looking at respecting each other's independence. One of the things that will cause relationships to fail is when both spouses can't feel a sense of independence. And we would have talked in our discussions before that spouses must have their own time out with their friends.
Definitely.
The girls' night and guys' night and all of that, without it becoming a battleground. Right? If we create that safe space or relationship, if I said to Raquel, I'm going out with the guys tonight, I mean, there shouldn't be a tug of war happening. Or if Raquel says, tonight I'm going out with the girls, there shouldn't be a tug of war happening. Raquel says a friend of mine called me, and we want to go to lunch, but he's a male. Why should I be overly concerned about that if we have a relationship where our communication is what it should be?
And that's that leads me to making the point that these elements that we're speaking of should have been set from the outset.
Should have been set from the onset.
Yeah, from the onset. So if I call and say, oh, I'm going to link up with a old friend from school or who is a male, then we'd have discussed from before in terms of how we navigate our friendships.
Yes.
What is allowed, what is not allowed, what I'm comfortable with. So it's a case where I'm not going to be going off to some secluded beach spot. We're going to lunch in a public place where everybody can see. And so this element of maintaining your independence is very, very important, because in this day and age, you have people who are not interested in marriage for that reason, because they don't want to feel like doormats. They don't want to feel that they're losing themselves when they decide to take on marriage.
And also be honest about what you're not comfortable with. Because do you know, Raquel, sometimes in relationships, people and it usually happens at the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah.
Probably to impress the other person. People tell people their significant other that they are comfortable with things that they know that they are not comfortable with. Right? But again, for the sake of not showing themselves to be a bad person or whatever it is, and I find that men do it a lot. We say that we are comfortable with things that we know on the onset we're not comfortable, and it is going to cause problems in the long run. And so when we talk about things not to allow in our relationship, let us be honest. If you know that you're not comfortable with something, speak about it and then work through it.
Exactly. But So how do you help somebody who feels that they can't be honest?
Well, if you feel that you can't be honest with your spouse, then boy, you have a problem. That is indication that there are other issues that are happening, right? If it is that you have a spouse and you just feel that you can't be honest with this person, boy, wow. I say, just wow.
Yes, wow.
Right? Because your relationship, you are supposed to be able to feel as if you can discuss just about anything with your spouse. So if it is that you are at the point where you just feel that you can't discuss something open and honest with your spouse, then it means that you have to go and look at what are some of the underlying issues that may be causing this kind of feeling, right? Is your spouse not open to listening? Is your spouse overbearing? Is it that they are not trusting? There are
Yeah,
a number of things, and it could also be even your own insecurity also,
you're right.
right?
You're right.
Because a lot of time we project our own insecurities or even upon our spouses.
Exactly. So, from time to time it's necessary for assessment, for evaluation,
Yes, it is. It is. It is. What another thing? What we shouldn't allow in our relationship, disrespect and criticism, uh, and this can be a touchy one. I guess because of the world that we live in, Raquel, there are many cultural and societal shifts that are taking place, and this whole idea of us being independent. I think sometimes people use independence to cover up disrespect.
Also.
All right. And we find it usually, well, in our present society, we are now speaking of the independent woman. And I believe that women ought to be independent. I believe everybody deserves a sense of independence.
Everyone.
But when you are in a relationship, your independence takes on a
Different.
different look, takes on a different vibe, takes on a different tone. When we don't respect our spouses, it's going to cause a problem. Therefore, we are in a relationship, Raquel, and both of us are working. And again, these discussions should take place before
And
before before the
before
wedding
wedding
day,
day. And it should be
right?
ongoing
And
too.
it should be ongoing. This idea of, let us even look at something like finances. Is your money and my money, or is your money and my money our money, and all of that? Because these are some of the discussions that people are having. And I find that a lot of it borders sometimes on spouses being very disrespectful to each other, because it we want everybody wants to have their own way, right? And I look at what Ephesians chapter 5, 21 following, when Paul writes to the virgin in Ephesians, and Paul says, husbands, love your wives, and wives, respect your husbands. And we would have had a discussion
And that.
on Level Up Your Marriage before, that for men, respect is a big thing, right? Respect is a big thing. Respect is something that drives us as men. Respect is also very important for women. No
Yes.
woman wants to feel as if she's being used as a footstool,
No.
right? And I find that in the present world that we live in, especially this generation that we are presently having, who are moving into relationships, is that there's a huge misunderstanding on what it means to have love and respect for each other.
True.
And a
That's
lot
true.
of and I am in no way suggesting that there's anything wrong with independence.
Oh no, we're
Independence is a
not.
is a is a beautiful thing when used properly.
Yes, man. But you see, I guess when you talk about, I guess we can an additional spin on the element of disrespect and criticism,
Mhm.
because disrespect, the other side of disrespect is, where we where we use harsh words,
Yes, true.
where there's neglect,
Mm-hmm.
where
Dismissiveness.
dismissiveness, and in terms of even emotional intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
where one party might feel that they're always giving, they're always sacrificing, they're always, and so it comes back now to one party just feeling that, okay, that I don't have a place, I'm always giving, and the other party is always receiving. So it affects the morale, it affects the element of love and respect. So even those things, the element of, when you talk about disrespect, disrespect, it is also tied to the element of not being feeling valued,
Very true.
not
Very
feeling
true.
cherished.
Very
And
true.
so sometimes the behavior of one partner, can come across as disrespectful,
Yes.
just by, as we talk about, harsh words, being dismissive, not allowing each other to be heard. Because as we have said on our previous program, that is so important for the husband and wife to feel heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's necessary, in marriage is a partnership, is a friendship. And if it's one-sided, it's not really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really helpful. So what about the element of criticism? How does that come in the conversation about what not to allow? Say some more
Y-
about that.
Criticism. Well, criticism, constructive criticism is important.
That's allowed,
And that is allowed.
right?
But one of the things that constructive criticism demands is that there must be corrective measures.
Mm-hmm.
So you take, for instance, we are having a discussion, and something has been pointed out that needs to be addressed. It is not just pointing out what is wrong, but what is the solution that comes with it. In criticism, constructive criticism, again, the tone is also important.
Yes.
When your spouse does something that you might not necessarily approve of, or you think is a behavior that needs to be looked at, how you bring that message across to your spouse is important, because your spouse is not your child. And in today's world, we are even talking about children having rights, and children do have rights.
All right.
But you don't speak to your spouse as a child,
Correct.
right? You don't, in other words, you don't speak to your spouse how you don't want to be spoken to,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. You have to. They're
So,
treated as equals.
so there is criticism and there's criticism,
Mm-hmm.
right? Am I criticizing to destroy, or am I giving constructive criticism so that the relationship can get better, so that I may have a better understanding and you may also have a better understanding. If a behavior needs to be corrected from my side, then based on how the information is given to me, I am welcome to changing the behavior, or vice versa. But when criticism comes across as it is, I remember having a discussion with a couple once, and the young lady was relating something to me. Oh, we were talking about expectations, and I, asked both of them what are the expectations of each other. And when the young lady laid out her expectations, and they were not married yet, I said to her in the counseling session, "You don't need a husband, you probably need a dog."
Dog.
Yeah, because what you are bringing across is almost as if you are going to train your husband. But I say your husband don't, your husband, you're not getting married to train him. You're getting married to him because you want a partner for life. You want a partner who you will be able to build on. But I said, based on what you're saying, you probably need to get a dog because is you are straight up going to train this young man, right? And so even stuff like this, Raquel, this how we go about enhancing our relationships as spouses, even in giving feedback. I probably prefer to use feedback even more than
Right,
criticism.
yes.
How we go about giving each other feedback. My thing always comes back to this. What is your motive for giving the feedback? Are you giving the feedback because you're angry, because you're annoyed? Are you giving the feedback because you want to be unkind to your spouse? Or are you giving the feedback so that your spouse can have a better understanding and
And as a result,
as a result, your relationship
relationship,
gets better because of the change that is made?
yes.
And so when we talk about what not to allow, we also have to look at how do we give feedback. Let us not use the word criticism. How do we give feedback?
Yes.
Right? Sometimes as spouses, the way we give feedback, there's venom. Right? Yeah, there is venom in the feedback.
And so that's why, as we're talking about what is not allowed, then it's important then that you to think before you speak,
To think before you speak.
to calm down before you speak.
That's right.
Get rid of some of this high and strong emotions.
Yes.
Before you give the feedback.
You remember one of my famous statements, and it's something that I find I'm using more and more in marriage counseling and in workshops too. If you say it in your head and it don't sound good, in your head, saying it out loud is not going to make it sound any better, right? And we all know, we all know as human beings, and especially as wives and husbands, we know when we say some things in our thoughts how it sounds. As a matter of fact, let me go a bit further than that. We know the effect it's going to have on our spouses even before it is said.
Usually.
But what do?
We say it anyway.
Go ahead and say it same way. And then when the whole world tears down, we are trying to do damage control.
Right, and but we tell our children and we tell, think before you act. So
right,
spouses should remember to think before they act, before they speak as well.
And one of the things I don't believe in, Raquel, and you'd have heard me say it many times, I don't believe in slips of the tongue. Jesus says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So whatever we conceive in our thoughts is what is going to eventually come out. Note, we might not mean to say it when it is said. Right? The time when it is said, we might have, but it is already processed in our hearts. Right? And usually what happens, those things come out at the most inappropriate times. Right? Those thoughts that we have sometimes towards our spouses, especially in anger and annoyance and all of that, never come out in situations where we can even make quick correction. They always come out in circumstances where sometimes when the damage is done, it is hard to even go back and deconstruct the damage.
Right. So as that is, and that's such a very important and valid point. And I guess another side to it too is that one of the things we should not allow is not allow our we should not allow harbor resentment.
That's right.
We should not harbor ill will, because if a spouse continues to harbor bitterness and ill will, then of course what you just spoke about is going to happen. Where you have the slip of the tongue, where the wrong thing came out, the right thing came out at the wrong time in the wrong way, or that. And so you have to strike a good balance between expressing yourself, looking at the right time and place to express yourself, and also you talk about when to give. We're using the word feedback instead of criticism. So there's that whole element there. So while we're talking about things not to allow, we're also realizing that some of those things too have to be dealt with in such a way that it will enhance the relationship rather than destroy it.
Rather than destroy. True. Very true. Very true. I, it always baffles my mind though how hurt and bitter we can be towards each other sometimes. And if we just stop for a moment and Jesus says, "Who is my neighbor?" And he used the parable of the Samaritan to discuss who is my neighbor. And at the heart of what Jesus is getting at is that we must be willing to treat people how we want to be treated. You know what is kind of contradicting about that? All of us know how we want to be treated. If you ask me how I want to be treated, I can tell you from beginning exactly how I want to be treated. But to treat somebody else the same way is a problem. You see how much we feel robbed when we are not treated how we want to be treated? We feel as if, why, we have lost a limb. But to give somebody else the same thing becomes a problem.
Yes.
And what as we talk about what not to allow in our relationship, selfishness has no place in marriage.
True. Exactly.
The minute we begin to think just of self, it is putting a destructive ingredient in the relationship. In our relationships, in marriage, it cannot be about me, myself, and I, and God for us all.
And that's a big one. Selfishness is something that should not be allowed. But part of navigating that is that talk about being honest, because if everybody likes to think about themselves,
It's hard.
it's natural.
It's hard to put self aside in a
Right, it's natural. So how then do you navigate this element of not allowing selfishness to destroy a relationship? Because we're talking about respecting your marriage. What the aspect now we're on is what not to allow, and of course selfishness is a big thing, because people are naturally selfish.
True.
And so to stop and pause to think about, okay, your interest over my interest, and you keep doing your interest over my interest. Sometimes people might think, hold on, I'm somebody too. What about my interest?
I think
how do you
it's
balance
also
that?
it's the way we look at it, because if I understand this from a biblical perspective, when Jesus says, I think it's in the book of Luke chapter 6, when Jesus says that it is better to give than to receive.
Yes.
And the idea is, if I am focused on looking after your welfare, then my welfare is going to get looked after. Because that is the spin-off, the trade-off, When if I look after your interests in a genuine way, and both of us are genuine towards each other in terms of our relationship, then when I look after your interests, my interest is going to get served. And when you look after my interests, your interest is going to get served. But a lot of time, what comes in the middle of it is that we don't look at necessarily the trade-off in the moment. What we look at is what I am not getting. True. And the minute I don't see what I'm getting, then I also refuse to have your needs met. Because I'm not going to meet your needs if mine are not being met. And then nobody's needs get met.
And so even this element of marriage is for persons who are mature.
That's
It's
right.
for persons
True.
So that's one of the nuggets I want the audience to take from here as well, because this big element of selfishness can really wreak havoc in your relationship.
It can
really wreak havoc in your relationship.
Again, as we talk about disrespect, we'll talk about disrespect and criticism, and the whole emotion, setting boundaries and so forth. But what about also looking at the external influences that oftentimes plague our relationships? And I am finding that the more I get into this business of counseling, is the more I see people allowing external circumstances to affect their relationships.
Some of these external circumstances are like social media and
Work, social media, in-laws, friends, studying, children, possessions, where it is sometimes mentally exhausting. Home and we don't come to a place where we realize how much these things are affecting our relationships until the relationship is in problems. And that is when everybody comes wanting to fix it, right? But do we realize that if we are pouring into our relationships from very early, then these things are basically a non-issue? People who survive, I don't even like use the word survive in marriage, because marriage is not about surviving. Marriage is about having a relationship. People who grow in their relationships, Raquel, are persons who recognize that the relationship is a sacred space that should be protected.
True, definitely.
Where no, but the only person more important than the person you are married to is the Almighty God. Not even children. Because I've heard couples talk about that their children are more important than their spouses, and that's why so many marriages fall apart. Your children is not more important than your spouse. Your spouse is the most important person in your life. That's what the Bible says.
Outside of God,
Outside of God, and we put God there because God not moving, right? The most important person in your relationship is God, and then your spouse. And I've always said this to couples: if you are not willing to put your spouse first, don't get married.
Exactly. That's why we just said, it's for persons who are, mentally, physically, emotionally mature, because these are some hard stuff.
Exactly.
These are some hard things that come with it with the institution of marriage.
If you are not willing to commit yourself to this person for a lifetime, and make this person, we don't like using the thing about people becoming the center of our world. But if your spouse is not the center of your world, and if you can't make that I don't want to say sacrifice, if you can't make that commitment, then marriage is clearly not for you.
Right. And so, this that another thing that is coming to mind as we're talking about this, and we're talking about, okay, who is the center of your world? Children are important, the in-laws are important, God is the ultimate. Then of course you have your spouse. So that's why the element of boundaries must come in.
Boundaries are
so yes,
important.
we
Yes.
definitely we love our children, and we have to have boundaries. We love our parents, but there must be boundaries.
We love work.
We love work, but there must be boundaries. And so, in all of it, and even when it comes between God and a relationship, there still must be boundaries too, because God comes first, and then your relationship. So in all of it now, there must be some healthy boundaries that will guide the interaction and will guide.
But do you know that even God give us boundaries from Himself in marriage?
Of course.
God says when Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul says, and this is coming from a background of how the Corinthian Christians misunderstood Christianity and them being Christians and spiritual and their spirituality. When Paul says you can't take up prayer and fasting to the detriment of sexual intimacy, right? Paul says if there is going to be prayer and fasting, it must be by mutual consent, where both of you sit down and have a discussion. And as a matter of fact, Paul went as far as saying that if it is that you decide to take yourself away for prayer and devotion
Only
and
for a
to
time.
God, he says it's only for a time, right? So you can't be so overly spiritual that your partner is sexually starved. Paul says that's a no. So even God gives you these boundaries. And so we need also, when in understanding our relationships, that we must respect these boundaries. These boundaries must be there. Our work, or our families, or our in-laws, or whatever, our education. I have known persons who, when I've seen marriages break apart, Raquel, when one spouse decides to study.
This is the schoolwork
Where,
become the partner.
studying becomes the main priority, and the whole marriage falls apart. And then when the marriage falls apart, it is said that no, you were not supporting me when I was when I and that but you added to the problem. And so and that's why, again, Raquel, it comes back to these things must be discussed.
Exactly.
These
Exactly.
things must be discussed. I will never encourage two spouses to study at the same time.
Exactly.
I think it's very unhealthy for marriages. Right? I have seen it. I've seen persons do it and barely make it through.
Burnout.
Right? But you have to create the space in a relationship that's going to give your relationship the best
Best opportunity to
best
grow and to
opportunity to
thrive.
grow and survive.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. 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 You know.
So,
So go ahead.
what are some of the practical steps we can look at in terms of setting these boundaries? There are some things must be non-negotiable,
True.
and one of them is transparency, time together, fidelity. Both partners must protect this at all costs,
Definitely.
right? We often tell spouses that don't matter who you're married to, there are going to be people out there looking at you, or you are find you attractive, or whatever it is. You must know yourself,
True.
and you must also know your spouse. And that's why the conversation has to be ongoing, right?
Definitely.
Don't create this false reality that um your spouse is never going to look at somebody else or find somebody else attractive or whatever. Don't ever create that thing in your head, because you're that one man said that is equivalent to living in a fool's paradise. Right? What must take place is the discussion. And that's where
Definitely.
open and honest communication
Communication
comes
comes
in.
in.
Right?
Yes.
We have deal with spouses who are open with each other, that they are able to comfortably tell each other that, I saw this person today and they look good. It doesn't mean that you're going to go and chase after them. But you have open, honest communication where you can become, and that's part of vulnerability, by the way, where you can be willingly vulnerable with this person. Right? So that is important. The regular check-ins must be important. In setting boundaries, check in with each
Check
other
in.
regularly.
Check in.
Find out what is going on.
What are your expectations? What are your
Yeah,
concerns? What's up? What's up? And even growth areas, because the person and our mindset and our relationship when we started 17, 18
yeah,
years ago will be different from what it is today. So there has to be, it's important to have the conversation, the check-in.
yeah. Am I doing right by you? Rather than assuming that, boy, everything I'm doing, I am the best thing since sliced bread, when it might not be so. Because I may assume a lot of things, but the fact that I may assume that I'm meeting all your needs, but if I don't ask you, how do I know that? It is just an assumption.
It's an assumption.
Because I may be doing something, Raquel, that is very good. In and of itself, it's a good thing. But it is not meeting the need that you have.
Yeah, it's not helping the marriage.
And if
helping
it
the
and,
relationship.
and if it is not meeting your need, then however good my intention is, it's still going to work out at putting you at a disadvantage and putting the relationship at a disadvantage.
Yeah, so we talk about, as you say, ask questions.
Ask questions.
And also the other side of it
Open dialogue.
is to say something.
Right.
I was reading today, and the point came up that spouses need to say something.
That's right.
Ask,
Yeah.
do check in, ask for clarification. Say what you need, or ask for what you need.
And
So
also be willing to receive.
true.
Be when you are um receiving people's effort is also important. Because again, Raquel, I cannot be so dead set in my ways and expectations that even your effort, if it is not meeting my expectations 100%, I can't see the effort either. Because oftentimes we make it, we make the onus on the other person, but the person who is on the receiving end must also be open,
True. Agree.
right?
Definitely. Definitely.
That is important.
That is definitely
So
important.
in other words, it is really a two-way street, right?
That's what marriage is about.
Marriage
About
is,
us, not
yes,
about not
it
about I.
very
It's about
important.
us.
So keep regular check-ins and bring God into the picture. Well, not, I wouldn't say bring God into the picture because he's always supposed to be a part of the picture. But spend time in prayer and devotion with your spouse, looking at your marriage, praying for your marriage, talking about what's God's ultimate intention for our marriages, that it glorifies him.
True.
You realize that God looks at marriage so much that he describes marriage as the relationship between Christ and the church. That is how much God holds the union of marriage special, It is close, just as how Christ and the church is close to his heart. Marriage is also
So
very
close
close
to
to the
his
heart
heart.
of God.
Exactly.
Right? When you in Malachi, when he writes to Israel, and he says that boy, he hates divorce. And those are some
Strong
very
words.
strong words. God says, I hate divorce. When I joined man and woman together, it was not for them to break apart. It was for them to remain together. And so as we wrap up, we have to looking at what are the things that will help our marriages to grow, right? What are the things that we can add to our lives daily that will allow our spouses to grow to be the best wife or husband that they can be for you, right? That is the end goal.
Yeah.
And when we do this, our relationships ultimately glorify God.
Definitely.
Very important.
And so you talk about pray together, pray for each other. So we pray together, pray for each other, and seek God's wisdom in how we can protect the relationship, because really he established marriage, and so he's invested in couples having a good marriage.
In couples having
He's
good marriages.
invested in couples having a good
Right.
marriage. So he will send a way, he'll find a way, he'll provide the resources. If the couples are willing, if the couples are determined, then for sure he will provide the resources for the marriage and the relationship.
It is
grow
never
stronger.
God's intention for marriages to break up. Never. That was never part of his plan.
Mm-hmm. So we are wrapping up, and we were just wanting to remind you that we were talking about respecting marriage. What are the things to allow, what to allow, and what not to allow in your relationship. And when we talk about respecting your marriage, it means being intentional
Being very
about
intentional.
what you
Yes.
allow
What you do
and what
not
you
allow.
guard against.
Yes.
So understand that to have a successful marriage, it requires intentionality.
That's right. That's right.
It requires intentionality. So we talk about open communication.
Yes.
We talk about mutual respect,
Yes. Honesty.
accountability, and what are the things we should guard against, right? We should secrecy
Yes. Secrecy and deception.
disrespect,
Disrespect. Yes. That's important.
and any other harmful external influences. We should definitely
do everything in our power to keep them out.
Yes.
That's good. Well, level up your marriage. We have had a very good discussion tonight, Raquel.
Yes.
And we want to tell you that if there's anything that you want clarification on, any question that you want to ask, feel free to email us at levelupyourmarriagecoc @gmail.com or call us at 876-835-6524. That's 876-835-6524, or 876-421-6722. That's 876-421-6722. We are looking out to hearing from you, where we can help you to grow your marriage into something that glorifies the Almighty God. We thank you always for having us on Level Up Your Marriage, where we can share with you. Until next time, this is Raquel and Paul Blake coming from the island of Jamaica. We wish you a very good night. God bless.
Good night.